idea that I'd like to run by you.
Now, it's called 10-10. The idea is everyone starts cutting their carbon emissions by 10%. Thus,
Keeping the planet safe for everyone, eventually.
now this hasn't got to be a huge thing, but I would love it if you and your families would think about doing something.
What sort of thing, miss?
Well, like getting your dad to insulate the loft,
Or taking your next holiday by train instead of flying.
or buying energy-saving light bulbs.
We're thinking of using our car less. I'm going to cycle to school.
That's fantastic, Jemima. Now, no pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic! And those not? Philip and Tracy. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh, just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now, everybody, please remember to read chapters 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation, except for Philip and Tracy, of course.
CO2 is warming the planet. And the equation on CO2 is actually a very straightforward one. If you sum up the CO2 that gets emitted, that leads to a temperature increase. And that temperature increase leads to some very negative effects. The effects on the weather, perhaps worse, the indirect effects in that the natural ecosystems can't adjust to these rapid changes, and so you get ecosystem collapses. Now, the exact amount of how you map from a certain increase in of CO2 to what temperature will be and where the positive feedbacks are, there's some uncertainty there, but not very much. And there's certainly uncertainty about how bad those effects will be, but they will be extremely bad. I asked the top scientists in this several times, do we really have to get down to near zero? Can't we just cut it in half or a quarter? And the answer is that until we get near to zero, the temperature will continue to rise. And so that's a big challenge. It's very different than saying, we're a 12-foot high truck trying to get under a 10-foot bridge and we can just sort of squeeze under. This is something that has to get to zero. Now, we put out a lot of carbon dioxide every year, over 26 billion tons. For each American, it's about 20 tons. For people in poor countries, it's less than 1 ton. It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. Now that's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. We've seen now there's a type of foreign assistance for vaccines or for AIDS treatment that are incredibly effective. These are all about saving lives. And the good news is that as you make those breakthroughs, the population growth in the country goes down. These are all about saving lives. The population growth in the country goes down. The good news is the population growth in the country goes down. The benefits there in terms of reducing sickness, reducing the population growth, it really allows the society a chance to take care of itself once you've made that.
Microsoft founder Bill Gates has committed over $10 billion over the next decade to deliver vaccines to the world's poorest countries. Gates made the pledge while speaking at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, saying that this year needs to be the decade of vaccines. He said the commitment more than doubled the $4.5 billion his charity foundation has already given to vaccine research already.
Sweden being a great example of a generous donor. So at this milestone, we're essentially redoubling our commitment. Over this last decade, we've spent $4.5 billion on vaccine research and delivery. And today we're announcing a commitment over this next decade, which we think of as a decade of vaccines having incredible impact. We're announcing that we'll spend over $10 billion on vaccines. That will help invent new vaccines. That will help get some new vaccines out. That will help increase the coverage.
So there's important. The foundation believes the donation could save up to 7.6 million children through to 2019.
Now let's cross stateside, and the US has started to test a swine flu vaccine on children and adults. The US Department of Health and Human Services hopes to vaccinate at least 160 million people by December. Well, for more on this, let's cross to our correspondent Priya Sridhar, who's in our Washington studio for us. Hello to you, Priya. So what are the hopes for this new vaccine?
Thanks. Well, the swine flu vaccine has raised concerns with people across the world. A new survey shows that 1/3 of British nurses have said that they will not take the swine flu vaccine because they're worried about the possible side effects. Now, the swine flu vaccine from back in the 1970s, which is supposed to be pretty similar to the one that's being offered today, has been linked to a neurological disorder called the Guillain-Barré syndrome. And joining me to discuss all of this is RT contributor and investigative journalist Wayne Madsen. Wayne, thanks so much for joining me. First of all, can you tell me who has taken the swine flu vaccine so far, and what have you heard about it?
Well, apparently there has been a test community used already. We're also hearing that the vaccine that's being developed, they're saying it's not for everyone. Apparently children were used as, for lack of a better term, guinea pigs in Oklahoma.
There's been a lot of scrutiny of vaccines recently, specifically childhood vaccines. There's been a lot of news about, is there a connection with autism, for example? What do you make of all that? Dr. Wakefield wrote a paper about this saying that he thought there was a connection. And there was lower vaccination rates as a result for a period of time in Britain than the United States. What are your thoughts?
Well, Dr. Wakefield has been shown used absolutely fraudulent data. He had a financial interest in some lawsuits. He created a fake paper. The journal allowed it to run. All the other studies were done, showed no connection whatsoever, again and again and again. And so it's an absolute lie that has killed thousands of kids, because the mothers who heard that lie, many of them didn't have their kids take either pertussis or measles vaccine, and their children are dead today. And so, you know, the people who go and engage in those anti-vaccine efforts, you know, they kill children.
Right, just want to check on that 10-10 thing. Had some brilliant ideas from lots of you, how the firm can cut down emissions by 10%. Just quick show of hands, everyone who wants to get involved. Great, that's nearly everybody. And yeah, just for the record, no pressure. Those who aren't quite convinced about it yet. Cool, it's no problem. Your choice. Okay, so those of you planning something here or at home should probably get working on it. Oh, gorgeous. Those of you who aren't... Excellent. Have a great weekend, everyone.
In 2000, and it's happened several other times, congressmen used congressional power to force CDC to release secret documents to them. And then several congressmen who have brain-damaged children and grandchildren released it, even though they weren't supposed to. This was classified, and it was the heads of the CDC and the scientists saying, I wouldn't give it to my grandchildren or my kids. We've brain-damaged millions. And they say, well, we got to continue it. We can't admit that we know this does this, or we'll all go to prison. Now, they then, when that all came out in 2002, the documents were from 2000, but it took 2 years for it to come out. It was even on ABC Nightly News. Since then, they've lied and said the mercury was taken out.
1 in 150 children now stricken. There's certainly a demand for an answer, but now the prevailing strategy seems to be to downplay the possibility of any link so that parents will continue to vaccinate their children.
A loving grandmother and president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Renee Jenkins, is among those in medicine, in government, in the media, pretty much telling parents this problem's been solved. There is no mercury in the routine schedule of childhood vaccines anymore, except maybe just trace amounts. She's talking about a mercury-based vaccine preservative called thimerosal, and the truth is, there's still as much as ever in 11 vaccines, including most flu vaccines injected into pregnant women and kids, and some of them, younger than 9, get 2 doses in a single season. And also high levels of mercury from thimerosal in tetanus shots.